So, to repeat the great big lesson that I took from my father of what it took to grow Sheraton from one hotel to 400 at the time of his death, it's give people a better vision of themselves. That's what a leader does. But you know, growing up with him as a father, some of his attitudes rubbed off on me. And I got a chance, I didn't know it at the time, but I got a chance to experience this. It was when I was 15 years old, and I belonged to King's Chapel in Boston. It's a beautiful old church in Boston. And one fall day, I'm 15 years old, and it was after the services, and after the services, people kind of hang around and chat. And the minister came up to us, 30 or so of us, and he said, we've got a big problem for next Sunday. We don't have a Sunday school teacher for the 6th grade boys' Sunday school class. All right, a problem. And I'm thinking, as I listen to Reverend Barth, I'm thinking, 6th graders, they're only 11 years old. I'm 15. I could handle this. It would be easy peasy. What could go wrong? I volunteer, I said. But almost immediately, one of the adults in the room came up to me and she said, Mitzi, do you know why there's no Sunday school teacher for the 6th grade boys class? It's because there were 6 of them before you and they all quit. And then another came up to me and she told me, Mitzi, those 6th graders, those boys, they're some of the most disruptive, uncooperative, difficult future juvenile delinquents that have ever set foot in King's Chapel. Well, back then we didn't say OMG, but I'll tell you what I was thinking. I was thinking, oh, shucks. So, the next Sunday, I'm in King's Chapel, and I'm in the Sunday school room with a dozen 6th graders, 6th grade boys, and I have a job, which is in the next 5 minutes, I'm supposed to get these kids from the Sunday school class into the main part of the chapel, and they're all looking like little human wolves. And I look at them, and I get the feeling, as I look at them, that they'd rather devour me than do a single thing that I asked them to. And I'm thinking, I look at the door of the chapel, of the classroom, and I'm thinking, in my imagination, I'm running out of that door. I'm running out of King's Chapel. I'm going on to Tremont Street. I'm getting the Greyhound bus. I'm going to Seattle. I'm going to change my name. But there's a problem with that plan. First of all, it's not going to solve my problem of getting the kids into the main part of the chapel in the next 4.5 minutes. And the next part is, if I were to, try to wrestle these little brats to the ground and make them do it, there's a problem with that too, because almost every one of these kids was taller than me and weighed more than me. That just wasn't going to work. And then on top of that, I'm thinking of what Father said about intimidation is always a bad plan. Oh, and then one more thing. I wasn't exactly sure that this was exactly the behavior that a Sunday school teacher at King's Chapel should be doing. I needed a plan B. But I had a plan B. I happened to have in my pocket Hershey's Kisses. And I thought, I could tell these little human wolves guys, if you'll be good, if you'll be really good, I've got chocolate. But that wasn't going to work either, because I remembered what Father said about how bribery it's just not a good technique. Just don't do it. So I needed still another plan. I think we're at plan C right now. And there came floating into my head what he said about offer people a higher vision of themselves. And I'm looking at my little human wolves and I'm thinking, but I could give them a higher vision, a better vision. But my vision, of course, wasn't exactly what a grown-up's vision would be. My vision would be, what if we could absolutely astound the congregation by having my little monsters transform into little gentlemen? And I knew why this had a chance of success. Because what I knew at this point, and what I knew that my 11-year-olds also shared, at 15, I thought the purpose of life was to get attention. But I also knew that my little human wolves, why were they being so disruptive? Why did they have this terrible reputation? It was also to get attention. But the difference between me at age 15 and them at age 11 is that I made this wonderful discovery that positive attention is even more fun than negative attention. So, with the idea that we were going to pull one over on the grown-ups, I gathered them to me sort of like a mother hen, and I told them, guys, we're going to do something really, really fun. What we're going to do is we're going to pull the wool over the eyes of everybody in the entire congregation, and they're going to be astounded. We're going to make their heads explode. Well, at this point, I knew I had these guys' total attention. I told them, what we're going to do is they're going to think that in the space of like 3 minutes, you've transformed from being disruptive and difficult to being little gentlemen. Their heads will explode. So I looked at the kids and they were into it. They were into it because they got what I got, which is that this was going to be fun. Well, in the next 3 minutes, I got them to rehearse how they would go into the chapel part of the church. And the way they would do it, instead of kind of swarming in like little madmen, elbowing each other, jostling each other, being loud and disruptive, instead, this is what they practiced, how they would walk in like little robots, staring straight ahead, not looking left or right. When they got to their pew, they knew that their job was to file into their pew, again, not saying a word, and when they were all standing up, they would look for a little signal from me. And at that point, they'd all sit down all at once. They totally got into this. I mean, they loved the idea of pulling the wool over the grown-ups' eyes. And they also figured out, how they would reverse the process at the end of the sermon. But before we went into the chapel, we also had to deal with the question, and I asked them for help in this. I said, it's just plain guaranteed that the grown-ups are going to want to know what happened. And help me, guys. What do we answer when a grown-up asks you, what got into you? And one of the little boys, because they're all being little gentlemen right now, conspiratorial little gentlemen, one of the guys suggested, okay, here's what we tell them if a grown-up asks. We just say, Miss Henderson is very, very strict with us. Well, the kids all bought into that. And when it came actually time, we're now at time 0, and it's time for them to go into the kids' part of the grown-up service, and that meant marching down that aisle. They pulled it off to perfection. I was so proud of them. I'm thinking Academy Awards for these guys because they just did it just right, every part of it. And the best part of it was I'm looking at the grown-ups, and the church was transfixed. It was absolutely total silence. I was watching jaws drop as the congregation watched my little space aliens, because I mean they were like robots in alien possession or something. But as they watched the kids file in, just total silence, jaws dropping. It was fabulous, and the kids got more attention for being good than they had ever gotten for being bad. And at the end of the sermon, when church was over, and the grown-ups did come up and they'd ask the kids, and they'd all give some version of, the grown-ups asking what happened, and they'd all give some version of, Miss Henderson is very, 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 very strict with us, which is as fake as it could possibly be. But that's just to say that in the 1950s, we had our own version of fake news. But then I also played my role in this, because the kids and I were co-conspirators in this. And grown-ups would come and ask me, what did you do to those kids? You only had 5 minutes with them, and they're absolutely transformed. And I would look up at them, and I would tell them, with my best imitation of total innocence and a face that was just sort of, confused, I would tell them, what are you talking about? Is something different? More fake news. Well, that was the beginning of just a fabulous year for me, because the kids and I perpetrated this scam for the entire year. They would outdo themselves in ways of learning to be little gentlemen, and just, they got the reputation of the church as angels. I loved it. And during that time, would have etiquette lessons, and I would teach them how to stand up when a grown-up entered the room. I mean, can you imagine 11-year-olds? Then on top of that, would have things like, they'd have lessons on handshaking. And I'd tell them, when you shake hands with a grown-up, it's got to be firm, it's not bone crunching, but it's not a dead fish either, and you look them right in the eye. I mean, and they just totally got into it, because their vision of themselves now was the church's little gentleman. It was a wonderful time for me, but it also taught me something that I value for the rest of my life, and that I kind of hope is useful to you. And it's the following: that Father's advice, the thing that he said helped him build a company from 0 employees to 20,000, is that a leader's job is to give people a better vision of themselves. Try it.